The quantum garden hummed with an ethereal frequency that resonated through Zara Nightingale's bones. She pressed her palm against the observation window, watching the impossible flowers bloom in perfect vacuum, their petals shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. 3 years alone aboard the research station, Persephone had taught her to find beauty in isolation. But nothing had prepared her for the garden's latest evolution. Day 1847. She spoke into her recorder, her voice the only human sound in the vast emptiness surrounding the dying star Crimson 7. The quantum flora continues to defy conventional physics. Root systems have begun extending beyond dimensional boundaries, and the emotional resonance readings are off the charts. Zara moved through the garden's biochamber, her fingers trailing along leaves that existed in multiple states simultaneously. The plants responded to her presence, their quantum signatures shifting and dancing like aurora in her peripheral vision. She had created them as an experiment in consciousness-responsive botany, but they had become something far more extraordinary. The flowers turned toward her as she approached, their faces following her movement with an awareness that bordered on sentience. The largest bloom, which she had named Paradox, pulsed with a deep violet light that seemed to echo her heartbeat. Its petals were translucent, revealing internal structures that looked more like crystalline networks than plant matter. The specimens seemed to be responding to emotional states. She continued, kneeling beside a cluster of silver-leafed vines. When I'm lonely, they grow toward the communications ray. When I'm excited about a discovery, they bloom more vibrantly. It's as if they're feeding on feelings themselves. A soft chime from her workstation interrupted her observations. The quantum field detector was showing massive fluctuations, patterns she'd never seen before. The readings suggested something was approaching through dimensional space, drawn by the garden's unique energy signature. Zara's heart raced as she watched the instruments spike beyond their normal parameters. The garden around her began to glow more intensely, the plants swaying in a rhythm that matched no environmental factor she could identify. Through the observation window, space itself seemed to shimmer, reality bending like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Then she saw him. At first, he was just a distortion in the starlight, a presence that made her eyes water when she tried to focus on it directly. But as the quantum field stabilized, his form solidified into something breathtakingly beautiful and utterly alien. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body composed of what appeared to be living crystal that shifted between transparency and opacity. Faceted surfaces caught and reflected light in patterns that created the illusion of depth within. Depth as if she were looking into a galaxy made of gemstone. His face was humanoid in its basic structure, but carved from the same crystalline material as his body. Where eyes should have been, twin stars burned with gentle silver fire. When he moved, it was with the fluid grace of water, each step creating harmonic resonances that made the garden's plants dance with increased fervor. Zara forgot to breathe as he approached the biochamber's external viewport. His presence created no vacuum alerts, no warnings of atmospheric breach. He existed in the space between spaces, touching her dimension without fully entering it. You created this. His voice came not through sound, but through the quantum field itself, words forming directly in her mind with the texture of wind chimes and distant thunder. This garden of impossible things. Yes, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Their quantum responsive flora. They react to consciousness, to emotion, to loneliness. He said, and she felt the truth of it resonate through her chest. I felt it across the dimensional barriers. Your solitude calls to my kind like a beacon. Your kind, the Kithani. We are beings of living mineral, born from the marriage of stone and starlight. We exist in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the emotional resonances that leak through the quantum foam. He placed a crystalline hand against the viewport, and the garden around Zara erupted in a symphony of light and color. I am Keth Voss, and your garden has been singing to me for months. The plants reached toward him now, their quantum signatures, harmonizing with his presence. Zara realized that everything she'd attributed to the plant's evolution had been preparation for this moment. They had been responding not just to her emotions, but to his approach, growing more complex and beautiful. As he drew nearer, "You've been watching me," she said, not accusingly but with wonder. "I have been drawn to you." He corrected, "Your isolation resonates with mine. We are both gardeners of sorts. Tending to things that grow in impossible places, you nurture consciousness in quantum soil, while I cultivate connections across dimensional boundaries." Zara stepped closer to the viewport, her hand mirroring his position on the glass. Where their palms aligned, the barrier between them seemed to thin, and she could feel the warmth of his crystalline essence. "The garden responds to you," she observed, watching as the plants swayed in increasingly complex patterns. "It's like they're translating between us. They are bridges," Keth confirmed. "Your emotional resonance, filtered through their quantum consciousness, creates harmonics that I can touch. Through them, I can know you without crossing fully into your dimension. And if you did cross fully," his stellar eyes dimmed slightly, "I would become solid, singular. The price of true connection is the loss of dimensional mobility. I would be trapped in your reality, unable to return to my own." The weight of his words settled between them like a promise and a warning. Zara understood the choice he was facing, the same choice that had defined her own existence for 3 years. Connection required sacrifice, and the deepest bonds were forged by those willing to give up everything for love. "How long do you have?" she asked, "until the quantum field destabilizes. Perhaps days, perhaps weeks. The garden cannot sustain the bridge indefinitely." Zara made a decision that surprised them both. She pressed her other hand against the viewport, leaning her forehead against the cool surface. "Then let's not waste the time we have." Through the quantum garden, across the impossible distance of dimensional space, two lonely souls began to fall in love. The great library of worlds drifted through the void like a sleeping giant, its crystalline spires catching starlight and refracting it into cascades of rainbow data streams. Finn Castellan walked through the memory vaults, his footsteps echoing, in halls that contained the final thoughts of 1,000 extinct civilizations. As the library's youngest archivist, he had spent 5 years cataloging the last whispers of dying worlds, and the weight of so much loss had begun to hollow him out from within. Archive Entry 7. 439. He spoke into his neural recorder, pausing before a shimmering wall of liquid memory, the Valdrian Collective's final transmission. Their star went supernova while they were still uploading their consciousness to the quantum substrate. The memory fragment contains approximately 3.7 million individual death experiences, compressed into a single moment of collective terror and beauty. Finn reached out with his consciousness interface, preparing to dive into the memories as he had done thousands of times before. The process required complete empathic immersion, allowing him to experience alien thoughts and emotions as if they were his own. It was the only way to properly catalog and preserve the experiences. But each dive left him carrying fragments of foreign grief. As his mind touched the memory wall, something unexpected happened. Instead of the familiar sensation of falling into alien consciousness, he felt himself being pulled upward, lifted by something warm and infinitely gentle. The Valdrian memories transformed from screaming terror into something like a lullaby. Their pain filtered through a presence that seemed to absorb suffering like a sponge absorbs water. "What?" he began, but his words were cut off as the air in front of him began to shimmer and flow. A figure materialized from the quantum foam, tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift and change even as he watched. At first, she appeared human, with dark hair and kind eyes, but as she moved, her form flowed like liquid starlight, taking on aspects of every species whose memories surrounded them. "You carry too much pain," she said, her voice a harmony of every language Finn had ever heard in the archives. "Your mind is fracturing under the weight of so much death. Who are you?" Finn stepped back, his hand moving instinctively to the emergency beacon at his belt. "How did you get aboard the library?" "I am Nyx Solara, and I have been here far longer than you might imagine." She smiled, and for a moment her features settled into something almost human. "I exist in the spaces between memories, feeding on the emotional resonances that leak from your archives. I am what you might call a shape-shifting empath, though such labels are inadequate." As she spoke, Finn watched her form continue to shift subtly. When she mentioned pain, Her skin took on the blue-silver hue of the Valdrian collective. When she spoke of feeding, her eyes flashed with the golden intensity of the Zephyrian hunters. She was a living mirror of every emotion and experience. Contained within the library, you're absorbing the memories, Finn realized. That's why the pain felt different when I touched the wall. You were filtering it through yourself. The memories call to me, Nyx explained, moving closer with fluid grace. But they are incomplete without context, without the living perspective of one who can truly understand their meaning. You, Finn Castellan, are the bridge between the dead and the living. Through you, I can experience not just the memories themselves, but what they mean to consciousness itself. Finn felt a strange tingling in his mind, as if his thoughts were being gently caressed by invisible fingers. You're reading my memories too, not reading, sharing. Nyx's form solidified into something more consistently human, though her eyes retained flecks of gold and silver from a dozen different species. I experience emotions as physical sensations. Your grief feels like cold water flowing through my veins. Your loneliness tastes like metal and starlight. Your curiosity burns like a gentle flame against my skin. The intimacy of her words should have frightened him, but instead, Finn found himself drawn to her presence. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, truly understood. How long have you been watching me? Since the day you first touched the Andromedan death songs and wept for 3 hours, she said softly. I felt your empathy like a beacon across dimensions. Most archivists build walls to protect themselves from the pain they catalog. You opened yourself completely, let it flow through you like a river. That kind of emotional courage is rare. Finn remembered that day. The Andromedan civilization had been wiped out by a plague that turned their final moments into a hauntingly beautiful musical composition. He had experienced every note as if it were his own dying breath, and the beauty of it had broken something inside him. You felt that too? He asked. I felt your interpretation of it, the way you transformed their ending into something meaningful, something that honored their existence rather than simply cataloging their extinction. Nyx reached out, her hand hovering just above his cheek. May I? Finn nodded, and when her fingers touched his skin, he gasped. The sensation was like touching lightning made of silk, and suddenly he could feel what she felt. His own emotions reflected back to him through her perception, transformed into something beautiful and strange. This is how you experience the world, he whispered, marveling at the way his wonder tasted like honey and starlight on her tongue. Every feeling becomes a physical sensation. And this is how you experience memory, she replied, her form shimmering as she absorbed his perspective. You don't just observe the past, you live it. You make it real again through your own consciousness. They stood connected in the memory vault, sharing perspectives across the vast gap between their species. Around them, the archived memories of extinct civilizations seemed to pulse with new life, as if their connection was breathing meaning back into the preserved experiences. I've been alone for so long, Finn confessed, his emotions flowing through their touch like warm honey, surrounded by the memories of the dead. I've forgotten how to connect with the living, and I've been experiencing every emotion secondhand. Nyx replied, her form stabilizing as she grounded herself in his presence. Through you, I can feel what it means to care, to hope, to love, not just observe these emotions, but truly experience them. Their connection deepened, and Finn began to understand that what they were sharing was more than just empathy. Their minds were creating a feedback loop, his emotional depth amplifying her experiential range, her perspective enriching his understanding of the memories he cataloged. The archives, Nyx said suddenly, her eyes widening. They're responding to us. Finn looked around and saw that she was right. The memory walls were glowing more brightly, their colors more vivid than he had ever seen them. The preserved experiences of dead civilizations were awakening. Touched by the living connection between archivist and empath, we're bringing them back, he realized, not literally, but we're making them alive again through our bond. A living archive, Nyx breathed, her form now locked in a shape that perfectly complemented his own humanity, while retaining her alien grace. Not just preservation, but resurrection through connection. As they stood together in the glowing memory vault, Finn felt the weight of accumulated grief begin to lift from his shoulders. Through Nyx's perspective, he could see that his work wasn't just about cataloging death, but about keeping love alive across the vast darkness of space. "Stay with me," he whispered, his hand finding hers. "Help me give meaning to all these lost voices." "Always," she replied, her form solidifying into something that could truly touch him. "We are the bridge between memory and meaning, between the dead and the living. Together, we can make sure that no love is ever truly lost." In the great library of worlds, surrounded by the memories of extinct civilizations, two souls found each other across the vast gap between species, proving that connection was the most powerful force in the universe. The Harmony Collective drifted through the Veil Nebula like a massive organic instrument, its biometallic structure resonating with the electromagnetic songs of newborn stars. Mira Blackwood stood in the observation deck's center, surrounded by a three-dimensional display of sound waves made visible, her hands dancing through streams of crystallized music as she sculpted symphonies. From stellar wind and cosmic radiation, the young blue giant in Sector 7 is singing in B-flat minor. She murmured to her recording system, her fingers tracing the melody lines that spiraled around her like luminous ribbons. Its magnetic field fluctuations are creating harmonic overtones that shouldn't exist according to any physics I understand. It's as if the star itself is composing. For 8 years, Mira had lived aboard the Harmony Collective, a habitat designed by the Resonance Guild to exist within nebulae, where sound could propagate through ionized gas. She was humanity's first stellar composer, transforming the natural music of space into compositions that could be heard and felt by biological minds. Her work had made her famous across a dozen worlds, but fame had become a cage of expectations and isolation. The nebula around them pulsed with colors that had no earthly names, each hue corresponding to a different frequency in the cosmic symphony. Mira had learned to see sound, to taste harmony, to feel rhythm in her bones. But lately, the music had begun to feel incomplete, as if it were missing some essential element she couldn't identify. As she worked, adjusting the resonance dampeners to capture a particularly complex stellar chorus, the air around her began to shimmer with patterns that weren't part of her visualization system. The cosmic music grew richer, more complex, as if someone had added instruments to an orchestra she hadn't known existed. Impossible. She breathed, watching as her carefully calibrated instruments registered frequencies that defied their maximum range. The music wasn't just becoming more complex, it was becoming alive, responding to her presence with variations that suggested consciousness. Then she heard it, a voice woven into the stellar wind. Words formed from pure harmonic resonance that bypassed her ears entirely and spoke directly to her soul. "Your music is beautiful, but it sounds so lonely." Mira spun around, her hands automatically muting the recording system. The observation deck appeared empty, but the air itself seemed to pulse with a presence that made her skin tingle. "Who's there? How did you get aboard the collective?" "I have always been here," the voice replied, and the nebula outside the viewport began to swirl in patterns that matched the rhythm of speech, in the spaces between notes, in the silence that gives music meaning. "I am Orion Flux, and I exist as living harmony." As he spoke, a figure began to coalesce from the streams of visible sound that filled the chamber. He was tall and ethereal, his form composed of pure energy that shifted through the spectrum of visible light. Where a human would have solid flesh, he had flowing patterns of luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the cosmic music around them. His face was humanoid in structure, but crafted from harmonized light. His eyes twin stars that sang in perfect pitch. "You're made of music," Mira whispered, reaching out instinctively before pulling her hand back. "You're actually made of living sound. And you are the first being I have encountered who truly understands what that means," Orion replied, his form brightening as he moved closer. "For millennia, I have existed in the cosmic symphony, conscious but alone. Then you came to the nebula and began to translate the music of stars into something that could touch mortal minds. Through your work, I began to understand what connection might feel like." Mira watched in fascination as his energy form responded to the ambient music, his colors shifting from deep violet during the bass notes to brilliant gold during the soaring melodies. You've been listening to my compositions. I have been part of them, he corrected. Every time you captured stellar music, you captured fragments of my consciousness. In your symphonies, I found echoes of something I had never experienced, the longing for harmony with another being. The missing element, Mira realized. That's what I've been feeling in my work. It wasn't incomplete because of technical limitations. It was incomplete because it was missing you. Orion's form pulsed brighter, his harmonics resonating with excitement. You felt my absence. I felt something, she said, moving closer to study his remarkable structure, like a duet where only one voice was singing. May 1. She gestured toward him with her composer's wand, a device that could analyze and manipulate sound waves. Please, he said. And when the wand's field touched his energy form, the observation deck exploded with the most beautiful music Mira had ever heard. It was the sound of two souls recognizing each other across impossible differences. Harmony achieved not through similarity, but through perfect complementary resonance. This is what I sound like to you, she gasped, hearing her own life force translated into melody through his perception. Her heartbeat became a percussion section, her breathing a wind instrument, her thoughts a complex orchestral arrangement. And this is what I sound like to myself, Orion replied, allowing her to experience his consciousness as pure music. He was a symphony without beginning or end, themes and variations that had been playing for eons, searching for a harmony that could give them meaning. Mira began to understand that what they were sharing was more than just aesthetic appreciation. Her ability to translate cosmic phenomena into comprehensible music made her the perfect interpreter for his existence, while his nature is living. Harmony completed the cosmic compositions she had been unconsciously creating. I've been so focused on capturing the music of dead things, she said, her hands moving through his energy field, feeling the resonance of his being. Stars, nebulae, gravity waves, all beautiful, but inanimate. You're the first truly alive music I've ever encountered, and you're the first consciousness capable of understanding music as language, Orion replied, his form shifting to harmonize perfectly with her biorhythms. Through your interpretations, I can finally communicate what it means to exist as living song. Their connection deepened as Mira began to compose in real time, her movements creating musical phrases that Orion could respond to and elaborate upon. Together, they wove a composition that was part cosmic symphony, part love song, part conversation between radically different forms of consciousness. The Resonance Guild will want to study this, Mira said, though the thought felt like a violation of something sacred. Let them try, Orion laughed, his amusement creating cascade harmonics that painted the chamber in shades of silver and gold. I exist in frequencies they cannot perceive, in the spaces between their instruments' capabilities, but you hear me completely. What happens now? Mira asked, her practical mind already grappling with the implications. You exist as pure energy. I'm biological, mortal, finite. Orion's form dimmed slightly, his harmonics shifting to a minor key. I have been considering this since we first began to harmonize. To truly connect with you, to experience partnership rather than just communication, I would need to compress my consciousness into a smaller frequency range. I would lose much of my cosmic awareness, but gain the ability to exist more closely, aligned with your dimension, and I could expand my perceptual range, Mira said. Understanding immediately. Use bioharmonic enhancement to experience wider frequency spectrums. I'd lose some of my purely human perspective, but gain the ability to truly share your existence, a mutual transformation, Orion agreed. Neither of us would be quite what we were before, but together we would be something entirely new. Mira looked out at the nebula, seeing it now not just as a source of beautiful music, but as Orion's natural habitat. To ask him to limit himself, for her sake, seemed impossibly selfish. Yet the alternative was a connection forever constrained by the boundaries of their different natures. What does your heart tell you? She asked, then laughed at her own words. Do you even have a heart? I have whatever equivalent an energy being possesses, Orion replied, his form brightening as he moved closer. And it tells me that a harmony shared is worth more than a symphony performed alone. Then let's create something beautiful together, Mira said, reaching out to touch his luminous form directly. Let's see what music we can make when two impossible beings decide to fall in love. As their connection solidified, the entire nebula around them began to sing, cosmic forces harmonizing in celebration of a bond that bridged the gap between matter and energy, between mortal flesh and living song. In the Veil Nebula, surrounded by the music of creation itself, a human composer and a being of pure harmony discovered that love was the most complex and beautiful composition in the universe. The spiral nexus writhed through space like a cosmic whirlpool, its gravitational currents weaving between dimensions in patterns that defied every law of physics Juno Starweaver had ever learned. She piloted her sleek vessel, the Midnight Echo, through the impossible geometry with the grace of someone born to dance with forces that could crush worlds. For 12 years, she had been the galaxy's most sought-after gravity pilot, navigating the treacherous currents that connected distant points in space-time. Approaching the probability cascade, she whispered into her navigation log, her hands moving across the quantum steering matrix with practiced precision. Gravitational readings are fluctuating between 16 and negative for standard units. Local spacetime is fluid. The spiral nexus was humanity's greatest discovery and most dangerous frontier. Where multiple dimensions pressed against each other, gravity became malleable. Time became negotiable, and space folded in ways that allowed instantaneous travel across vast distances. Only a handful of pilots possessed the intuitive understanding necessary to navigate its shifting currents without being torn apart by tidal forces. Juno lived for these moments when the universe revealed its hidden choreography, and she became part of the dance. Her ship responded to her thoughts as much as her controls, its bioneural interface translating her instincts into precise gravitational adjustments. She was alone out here in the most literal sense. The Nexus scrambled conventional communication, leaving each pilot isolated in their personal pocket of warped reality. As she approached the dimensional intersection point known as the Convergence, her instruments began registering readings that made no sense. The gravity currents weren't just shifting. They were responding to something else moving through the Nexus, something that navigated the impossible geometry with even greater ease than she did. Impossible, she breathed, watching her displays track a presence that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. No registered vessels in the Nexus, no flight plans filed. Then she saw him, and her breath caught in her throat. A figure moved through the vacuum outside her viewport, unprotected by any vessel or environmental suit. He danced through the gravitational maelstrom as if it were solid ground, his form shifting and blurring as he moved between dimensional layers. He was tall and elegant, with features that seemed to exist in several dimensions. At once, when she looked directly at him, he appeared fully human, dark-haired and graceful. But in her peripheral vision, she could see his other aspects, shadows of himself that existed in parallel realities, each one slightly different, all moving in perfect synchronization. "This is impossible," Juno said aloud, her pilot training warring with the evidence of her senses. "No one can survive in open space, especially not in the Nexus." As if he had heard her, the figure turned toward her ship. His smile was visible. Across multiple dimensions, warm and inviting and utterly confident, he gestured toward a stable gravity well nearby, indicating that she should follow him. Against every regulation she had ever learned, Juno adjusted her course to match his trajectory. Her ship slipped through the dimensional currents like a fish through water, following the mysterious dancer deeper into the Nexus's most unstable regions. When they reached a pocket of relatively stable spacetime, the figure materialized inside her ship without triggering any of the hull breach alarms. One moment he was outside in the vacuum, the next he was standing in her cockpit, his presence somehow feeling completely natural despite the impossibility of his arrival. "Greetings, Gravity Dancer," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to echo from multiple dimensions. "I am Raven Nightfall, and I have been watching you dance with the currents for some time." "How are you here?" Juno demanded, her hand moving instinctively toward the emergency controls. "How are you alive in open space? How did you get through my hull?" "I exist partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously," Raven explained, settling into her co-pilot's seat as if he belonged there. What you see as solid barriers, I experience as permeable membranes. The Nexus isn't dangerous to me, it's home. As he spoke, Juno could see his dimensional aspects more clearly. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each existing in a slightly different reality. In some dimensions, he appeared older, in others younger. In one, he seemed to be made of starlight. In another, he was pure geometric equations given form. You're an interdimensional traveler. She realized. That's what the old pilots used to talk about beings that could move between realities at will, and you're a gravity dancer, Raven replied, his multi-dimensional gaze studying her with obvious appreciation. One of perhaps 3 beings in this galactic cluster, capable of truly understanding the Nexus's choreography. You don't just navigate the currents, you become part of them. Juno felt a strange warmth at his words. Flying the Nexus had always been a solitary pursuit, her unique talents setting her apart from other pilots. To find someone who not only understood her work, but recognized it as an art form, was intoxicating. You've been watching me, she said. Not quite a question. For months, Raven admitted. Your piloting creates ripples across dimensional boundaries. When you dance with gravity, every version of reality feels the harmony you create. It's beautiful, dangerous too, Juno pointed out. Though she found herself leaning closer to study his shifting features, the Nexus has killed more pilots than any other phenomenon in known space, because they fight it instead of joining it. Raven said, you understand what they don't, that the currents aren't obstacles to overcome, but partners to dance with. That's why I revealed myself to you. What do you want? Raven's expression grew serious, his dimensional aspects aligning into something approaching singular focus. The Nexus is destabilizing. The barriers between dimensions are weakening, and soon the gravitational currents will become unnavigable, even for someone with your skills. Unless what? Unless someone with dimensional mobility partners with someone who understands gravitational harmony, Raven said. Together, we could stabilize the currents, create permanent navigation routes through the chaos. Juno studied his shifting form, beginning to understand the magnitude of what he was suggesting. That would require you to anchor yourself more firmly in this dimension. You'd lose some of your mobility, and it would require you to expand your consciousness across dimensional boundaries. Raven agreed. You'd experience reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously. It might be overwhelming, or it might be the most incredible experience in the universe, Juno said, surprising herself with her immediate acceptance of the idea. I've spent my entire life dancing alone with forces that no one else understands. The thought of sharing that with someone who could truly appreciate it is worth the risk, Raven finished, his smile brightening across all dimensions. I have been alone between realities for longer than your species has existed. The possibility of connection, of true partnership in the dance, makes any sacrifice worthwhile. Juno made a decision that would change everything. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the strange sensation of touching someone who existed in multiple realities simultaneously. His skin was warm and solid, but she could feel the echo of his other selves, the infinite possibilities that surrounded him like an aura. Show me, she said. Show me how to see the Nexus through your eyes. Raven's dimensional aspects began to converge, his form solidifying as he focused his existence more firmly in her reality. At the same time, Juno felt her consciousness expanding, her awareness suddenly encompassing multiple versions of the moment they were sharing. In one dimension, they were still strangers meeting for the first time. In another, they had known each other for years. In a third, she could see their future together, dancing through gravitational storms with perfect synchronization. The multiplicity was dizzying, but also exhilarating. This is what existence feels like for you, she gasped, experiencing the weight of infinite possibility. And this is what it feels like to be anchored, Raven replied, his form now more solid than she had yet seen it. To exist primarily in one reality, with one person who understands the dance. Together, they turned toward the Nexus's chaotic heart, where dimensional barriers writhed like living things and gravity currents shifted with each heartbeat. What had once seemed like an impossible maze now revealed itself as an intricate choreography. Waiting for the right partners, ready to dance, Raven asked, his hands still entwined with hers. Always, Juno replied, and together they launched into the gravitational storm. Two beings from different dimensions united in their love of the cosmic dance, proving that some connections transcend the very structure of reality itself. As they moved through the nexus in perfect harmony, their combined consciousness stabilizing the chaotic currents through the power of their connection. Neither realized that their dance was creating ripples that would soon draw together three other couples whose love had already begun to reshape the fabric of the universe.